Then comes the meeting with Vince McMahon and Triple H backstage at Raw the night after the Rumble. This was the meeting that we've heard nothing about. We know that it was the three of them in there. What was discussed has not come out until now, at least Punk's version of what happened. He says they asked him to take a piss test before the upcoming tour. I guess there was some kind of tour coming up, and he refused. And Triple H piped up, made a comment, and said, well, you know, Dave Bautista just took a piss test. And Punk says he looked right at Triple H and said to him, did you? And Triple H had nothing to say. And I'm reminded when I heard that of a story Scott Steiner told years ago about his WWE run where they wanted him to take a drug test. And this was pre-wellness policy, so I'm not even sure what kind of drug policy they had in place at the time. But they wanted him to take a test, and he told them, fine, have Triple H, who he would have been feuding with at that time, have Triple H pick me up in a limo, and we'll take the drug test together. And after that, he says, he never heard about it again. There was no follow-up. There was nothing. You can't have a different set of rules for different people. You just can't. And clearly that's what's been going on now for a long time. Another revelation here, as he recounted his meeting with Vince and Triple H, is the admission, and I was so happy to hear this, the admission that the WrestleMania 30 main event this year was supposed to be, as it was reported by some of the so-called dirt sheets at the time, Batista against Randy Orton. And the number 2 match on the show would have been CM Punk against Triple H, which, if you paid any attention, if you remember that episode of Raw, the go-home show to the TLC pay-per-view when they were building up the big unification match between John Cena and Randy Orton as like the greatest match of all time, and they had all the legends in the ring, all the former champions, and they had that great show closing angle where there's like a big brawl, and Triple H shoves down CM Punk, and CM Punk gets up and goes after Triple H, and then Shawn Michaels super kicks Punk, and then Daniel Bryan gives Shawn Michaels the flying knee, and then Stephanie accidentally gets knocked. It was a great angle. But they were already planting the seeds in December for Punk versus Triple H with that angle. So it was obvious that was the direction they were going in. So that would have been the number 2 match. The stuff with Triple H is what I found to be the most fascinating, because it was always obvious to me the two guys probably didn't like each other, even if you go back to when they feuded on television all those years ago. It was kind of, I guess in that way, almost like a Brett-Shawn dynamic where it came through in their words and just the way they kind of acted around each other that there's probably a lot of truth to what they're saying, but they're just trying to pretend that there's no truth there. And he even said, he goes, he never liked Hunter. Hunter never liked him. It was always a bad vibe when they were in the room together. And he said to Triple H, he goes, listen, that was the planned match of WrestleMania, and I think Punk even said the plan was for him to win. I mean, who knows? He said, I don't need to wrestle you. You need to wrestle me. And he said to Triple H straight up, I still resent you beating me in that match 3 years ago. That was not best for business, he said. And that's absolutely true. And you'll have people who say, oh, what a crybaby, he's still bitching about a match. He lost the match 3 years ago, But he's right. I mean, I get people who will sometimes send in questions to me as part of the mailbag for the sound-off, and this whole thing gets drudged up again, and I give them the same answer every time. All these years later, sometimes you think maybe there's a reason for it. 6 months down the road, oh, it all makes sense. Now it's 3 years later, and I still don't get it. Punk was white hot at that time. He was the hottest thing in all of wrestling after he beat Cena for that championship at Money in the Bank, coming off the pipe bomb promo, and he went away. They only kept him off television for like a week, which was the first mistake. Because there was a lot of excitement, like, oh, where's Punk going to end up next? He put the belt in his refrigerator. Is he going to take it to another wrestling show? Is he going to take it to a ball game? Like, where's he going to go? And they just couldn't help themselves, and they brought him back the next week so they can have the rematch at SummerSlam. But he was the hottest thing in wrestling, and it's just, it shouldn't be odd to me, but it is odd to me that all of a sudden Triple H, who was not a full-time active performer at that time, he wrestled maybe once a year, even then, basically comes out of retirement so he can work a program with the hottest act in the entire company. And it builds to one match on pay-per-view that Triple H wins. And there's no follow-up. There was never a rematch. In fact, the plan had been for Punk to go one-on-one with Kevin Nash, of all people, I think at the following pay-per-view. Actually, no, I think the plan was for him to wrestle Nash at that show. And then Nash supposedly had like a heart issue. He was taking Plavix, and it caused some kind of problem. And I love how they never revisited that either. I mean, probably for the better. But I love how Kevin Nash left Punk laying with like 3 jackknife powerbombs on television. Punk never did get his revenge. So they kind of rushed it. I guess the plan may have been for Punk and Triple H at Survivor Series. They did it at Night of Champions instead. And yes, Punk got to kick out of the dreaded pedigree 3 different times. Not even poor Booker T at WrestleMania 19 had that honor. But he lost. Hottest act in the company. And they beat him. With almost like a non-wrestler at that point. And Triple H went back into his little sheltered retirement until WrestleMania the following year. Never followed up on it. Never a rematch. Nothing. It's almost like, explain to me what the point of this was. If Steve Austin back in 1997, who was gaining a lot of steam and really starting to come into his own as a top act, and he was building momentum, the hottest thing in wrestling, and unfortunately he got hurt, and they were smart in that they found ways to keep him on television while he healed from the neck injury, but it would almost be the equivalent of having, you know, I mean, I can't even think of a name off the top of my head, Hulk Hogan, or fucking Bruno Sammartino coming out of retirement. They do this big marquee match at a pay-per-view in late 97 and just have them beat him. Why? I don't know. He gets the rub, brother. I don't know. That wouldn't have made any sense, and neither did this. So I was happy to hear him bring that up as well, and that apparently Triple H had no answer for it. He said Triple H the whole time was just gritting his teeth, obviously very pissed off, had nothing to say. Of course he has nothing to say. Of course he does. There's no answer for it. What's he going to say? So he ended the meeting by telling Vince, I'm done. And yes, Punk got to kick out of the dreaded pedigree 3 different times. Not even poor Booker T at WrestleMania 19 had that honor. But he lost. Hottest act in the company. And they beat him. With almost like a non-wrestler at that point. And Triple H went back into his little sheltered retirement until WrestleMania the following year. Never followed up on it. Never a rematch. Nothing. It's almost like, explain to me what the point of this was. So I was happy to hear him bring that up as well, and that apparently Triple H had no answer for it. He said Triple H the whole time was just gritting his teeth, obviously very pissed off, had nothing to say. Of course he has nothing to say. Of course he does. There's no answer for it. What's he going to say? So he ended the meeting by telling Vince, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not happy. I'm beat up. I'm hurt. I feel lied to. It's not fun anymore. I have no passion for this. I'm done. And he says Vince, with tears in his eyes, stood up. He wanted to give him a hug. He really didn't want to hug him, so he kind of gave him like a half hug. Triple H put his arm out. He shook Triple H's hand, and he said, goodbye. And he left. And he never looked back.